Welcome back, everyone. This is the final entry in our small basement dig out. We're going to be taking you all the way from the start here to the end and then kind of narrating the whole process from beginning to end so you guys understand everything that happened on this job. With that said, I'm going to be jumping in and out here, kind of explaining everything that's going on and just informing you guys on the certain processes that's going on. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So first of all, you can see here from this angle, we had to push back the vapor barrier from the pre-existing crawl space. And switching angles here, you can see for the first 2 or 3 weeks here, we were just really focused on getting all this material and dirt out of this crawl space. So you can see a lot of shoveling, a lot of hand digging, all that kind of stuff. And before we get questions in this video, the reason we didn't use a skid steer is because this is just the way we work. We've had a process for manual labor and getting this done efficiently. And bringing down a skid steer or a small electric skid steer brings up its own challenges and problems that we really don't want to have to worry about. So we just did it all by hand. But with that said, you can see the guys are just zooming through this. I mean, it does help that we have this in a time-lapse format, but the guys are cruising along, getting all this material out, and now we can start to see the beginning of our material being brought in as well. Working in these smaller confined spaces, it's important to get a main kind of access room going so you have enough room to store materials as well as move around in an efficient manner. And what do I mean by this? Well, at the beginning, we could only really fit 1 to 2 people in here with shovels to get all this dirt moved out. But now that we have this larger main room, we're able to fit up to even 5 people down here and just get this moving along even faster than before. Luckily, this is a smaller basement dig out that we're doing. The square footage isn't too great. However, we are going pretty deep down here. The existing crawl space was only roughly 2 feet, so you really had to army crawl to get underneath this. This basement called for a 9-foot ceiling height, so we had to dig out roughly 7 to 8 feet of material here, and with the smaller footprint of this basement, it does happen pretty fast, which is nice to see. I do hope you guys are enjoying this overall process. I tried to speed it up as much as I can, so you're not just sitting here watching dudes shoveling for 30 minutes, so we can kind of breeze through this first part and then get into the nice juicy bits when we start to do the footers, the final pour, vapor barrier, all that good stuff, which is a little bit more exciting and more of that final product that you're looking for. However, I do want to come in here and preface that this is for entertainment purposes only. There is a lot of danger involved with doing this kind of work, with having a house above you and getting rid of the supporting structure that's holding this house above you. So we highly recommend, if you plan on doing any kind of this work on your own home or hiring someone to do this, that you hire professionals that know what they're doing. That way you don't have any kind of catastrophic failures or anything that goes wrong that could pretty much result in your house being completely ruined. But with that said, you can see here the guys have finally breached all the way back towards that back wall. And as you can see, if you pay attention to the walls, what they're doing is they're kind of trenching out these little sections. And those are where the footers are going to go. Notice how they do that is they keep the dirt in the center. That way it's supporting the structure still. Because if you were to remove that whole back wall, the foundation would collapse. So you want to keep a little bit of support back there. That way there's something holding up this house. You can especially see what I'm talking about here. So you can see he just threw up that blue vapor barrier in one of the little holes that they dug. That's going to be one of our first footers. And right next to that on either side, we have these kind of dirt pillars that are keeping this house afloat. Switching camera angles here, you can see they're following that same pattern over here on that back wall, digging into that trench, leaving a little bit of a dirt column on either side to maintain the strength of the foundation, and so on and so forth. With that done, we have these 2 back walls finished, and now it's time to begin work on our footers. So you can see that blue vapor barrier on the back there, and then they put some yellow on the one right next to that one. And from here, they just poured the footer slab there on the ground, and then once that's nice and cured, they're going to form up the actual wall of the footer and continue with that. So you can see they poured a little bit of concrete into their wheelbarrow and then they dumped it onto that footer slab, and that's what is going to hold up the actual footer wall. So that's the first thing that happens here. Now you can see they're starting to bring in the wood for the footer wall so they can form those up. And as I mentioned before, since we have this whole thing dug out, we can have a lot of crew down here working together in tandem to get this done efficiently and quickly. So we have roughly 5 guys down here working on each individual footer, putting vapor barrier in, the rebar, pouring the footer slabs, and then putting up some bracing as well. You can see they put up a little bit of forms there at the back end just for some extra support on the building. And right here on the right, you can see they have their first form up here, and then they just brought in a concrete pump truck to pour in those footers. So you'll notice that we use a mix of a concrete pump truck as well as the concrete bags. And the reason for this really just comes down to efficiency and availability. So we have an in-house pump truck that every now and then is doing other jobs, but if it is available, we'll use that just because naturally it's a lot easier. However, when that's not available, we'll use the good old-fashioned wheelbarrow mix and just pour it for most of the stuff as well. Whatever is just the most efficient. With their first set of forms up, they're going to switch gears here and start to kind of remove some more material and just clean up the area so they have a little bit more of working room and just getting most of that material out of here. So you can see that right here. They're just getting rid of this nice pile of dirt that they have near the entrance and just getting that all fixed up while they're waiting for the forms to cure. And while we watch them slowly start to move all this dirt out that they are working on, I kind of want to take a second to talk about just the working conditions of the basement digouts. They're really nice just because they're a little bit more tame than the weather outside. So if it's scorching hot outside, it'll be a little bit cooler in the basement and vice versa in a snowier or cooler condition. And of course, if you throw some fans and heaters down there, it's even better and a more pleasant experience. Especially on this one, we had at the later half of this some fans down there as well as some heaters on the colder days, and everything just felt nice and warm. And the best part about this is there really is no weather delays when it comes to the basement digouts. It could be snowing, raining, and the job can continue to work on because it's an enclosed environment and you're not having any of that weather affect you down there. But with that said, let's go ahead and catch up with the crew and see what they've done. So as I mentioned before, you can see here, they really just focused on getting all this material out of here. It's amazing when you get to this stage of the project, you think that all the dirt has been removed, but there's still so much more to go. And it's always funny to see just how much dirt can be compacted in such a small area. But with that done, their first set of forms have cured, so you can kind of see it there in the back corner. They're removing the forms. We'll get a better look at that here when we switch the camera angle. So right here, you can see that they're going to start removing all those wood forms and then kind of rebuilding them and reconstructing them for the second set of forms that we're going to create. And as you can see here, now that those footers are fully cured and can support weight on them, they're going to remove those dirt columns that I mentioned were doing that role before. And you can see just the amount of dirt that came out from those little columns, so they're going to get rid of all of that, and then they're going to begin work on their second set of forms. First things first, they're going to begin excavating the other footer holes. So you can see here they're currently filled up with dirt, so they're going to make their way, dig a little bit of a trench for the footer slab, and then dig back for the actual footer wall. We can really see that now, especially since most of the material has been removed out of the basement. We have a lot more clarity to see exactly what they're doing. So you can see here, they dug out their footer hole, they put up some vapor barrier, and then they put up some rebar, and now they're going to pour the footer slab, and then once that slab has cured, they're going to put up their forms and then pour the actual footer wall. As I mentioned before, we had the pump truck available that day, so you can see the hose in there really quick. They poured all those footer slabs, and then now, since it wasn't available, they're using the wheelbarrow to do the rest of those. And as I mentioned before, once those have enough time to cure, they then put up their forms and they'll repeat the same process, pouring the footer wall. And it's kind of nice with the time lapse, you can see when the actual concrete is cured because it goes from that dark gray color to a more lightish gray. Really fun to see. Switching back to our other camera here, you can see that same exact thing just from a different angle. They got the hose in here pouring some of those footer slabs, and then they're going to bring in some concrete bags to finish the rest of those off. You can see their giant wall of wood material there in the back that they're going to pull from to reconstruct their forms and then put those up for the remaining footers. So when you're this deep in the project, it's nice just because you can see how much room they have for storage, moving around, all that kind of stuff. And it just makes the project go so much smoother, so much faster, and it just really starts to pick up speed at this point. They're then going to repeat this same process over here on the left side. You can see they're digging that footer hole, and then they're going to put in rebar and then put in the concrete slab that I've been talking about. And as you can see here throughout the process, they're also putting up some temporary support pillars up to the roof, and this is overall just for safety. I can't stress enough how dangerous this job can be if something was to go wrong. So it's very important for the crew to be mindful and take into consideration what they're doing and if they need to put up any kinds of supports or anything for their safety. And just like that, cutting back into the footage, they're starting to remove all their forms, and you can see that final new foundation being revealed. With the back wall finished, they're now going to switch gears and start work on the front entry point that we're looking at right underneath this camera here. So when we switch angles, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Same exact process. They're going to bring in all the materials they need to create their forms, create the footers, all that good stuff, and they're going to repeat that same process over here near that front entrance on the left-hand side here. And this should happen relatively quickly. It's a lot less surface area, and it's only a few walls that they have to put these forms up, and you can see they're already making quick work of this. So bringing in all their materials from this angle, you can see they're doing that, and then they build a kind of small ramp just to slide all those concrete bags down. And since the pump truck wasn't available for this week, they're going to do all their pours with the concrete bags. And since we're looking at an almost complete basement in terms of excavation, there's so much room to put all this material as well as walking around. You can see that entrance has been poured and that concrete cured. So with that done, they're going to create a custom form there for the entrance, and then they're going to pour it. And just like that, a few days later, they're going to tear down that form, and it's really on to the final little footer hole that they got right here. So you can see they're digging that one out. You can see just how much dirt came out of that little thing. It's always hilarious to see just how much dirt is in these basements. But they're going to do that, remove the final bit of material here, and pour that final footer. And just like that, with that final form in place, they're going to remove it, and we have a finished foundation here. And if you haven't seen our weekly series on this project, they actually do have an existing basement on the other side of this brick wall that we have to saw cut into, so they're doing that right now. And with this saw cut complete, this is going to allow other general contractors to come in and do the plumbing. So you can see we kind of skipped over the perimeter drain here. I wasn't able to get any footage of that, but that white pipe in the floor there, that's the perimeter drain. So if there's any seepage or water coming up from the ground, that's going to capture it and take it to a sump pit so you don't get any kind of water damage. And you can see this guy with the jackhammer. He is the plumber. He's digging a trench for all the plumbing that's going to go into the existing basement where they already have some of their plumbing hooked up. During this process, we're not really present. We let him do his thing and get everything wrapped up before we come back in and do all the finishing touches that we need to do. The nice part with the plumbers being, though, I will say they are quick at what they do. They're in and out pretty quickly, so depending on the size of the project, they'll be there, and then a few days later, they're out, and we're ready to come back in and do what we need to do. Just like that, plumbing is done. They're going to cover it back up. They did have to make a few adjustments with the perimeter drain to accommodate for the plumbing, but once that was done, it was all covered up and on to working on the kind of final touches of this thing. Now it's time for the home stretch. So they're bringing in the vapor barrier to stop any moisture seeping up, some expansion joint along the perimeter, and then a little bit of some vapor barrier tape to patch any of those holes that they got. With that done, using our pump truck, we bring it in, and in a matter of seconds in this video, it's done. So we took this dirty old crawl space and turned it into a nice livable room. It isn't finished. That's going to be sent over to the other general contractors to finish up the basement, but the concrete is done and the basement dig out is finished. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.